The phone call came on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office. My accountant's name flashed across the screen, unusual for Martin to call outside our scheduled meetings. "Margaret, are you sitting down?" he asked, his normally composed voice tinged with concern. "There's been some unusual activity on your credit card, multiple charges totaling over $5,000 in the past week, gaming equipment, designer clothing, and a weekend booking at the Grand Lakeside Resort. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I felt my chest tighten. My platinum card, the one I kept specifically for business expenses and rarely used for personal purchases. "That's impossible," I replied, pulling up my online banking. "I've had the card with me the entire time." That's when Martin cleared his throat. "The name on the purchases, Margaret, they were made by Tyler, your grandson." I stared out the window at the sprawling Chicago skyline, my vision blurring with a potent mixture of shock, disappointment, and something sharper: betrayal. Tyler, my 20-year-old grandson, the brilliant computer science student who I'd personally recommended for the coveted summer internship at Williams Financial Group, my company, the business I'd built from nothing over 40 years. The internship, set to begin in just 4 weeks. The internship that opened doors few his age ever got to walk through. "Margaret, are you still there?" "Yes," I answered, my voice controlled despite the storm brewing inside. "Send me the complete list of transactions." "I'll handle this." I ended the call and sat motionless in my chair, mind racing through possibilities, explanations, justifications, and finding none sufficient. Tyler had been in my home the previous weekend for our monthly family dinner. He'd helped me update. My computer insisted on setting up new passwords for better security. I'd stepped away to take a business call, leaving him alone in my office for no more than 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That's all it had taken for him to betray my trust completely. I picked up my phone and dialed my daughter, Emily. Tyler's mother needed to know what her son had done. "Mom, is everything okay? You never call during work hours." "No, Emily, everything is not okay. I need you to come to my house tonight. We need to discuss Tyler." "What's happened? Is he hurt?" The immediate maternal panic in her voice almost made me soften. Almost. "Tyler is fine, physically at least. His judgment and moral compass appear to be severely damaged. I'll explain everything tonight, 7 o'clock. I hung up before she could press for details. This wasn't a conversation for the phone, and I needed time to decide exactly how to handle what would come next. One thing was absolutely clear. There would be consequences. Serious ones. I canceled my remaining meetings for the day, something I'd done perhaps 5 times in my entire career. Then I pulled out the bottom drawer of my desk, the one with the good scotch, and poured myself 2 fingers neat. Some situations demand stepping outside one's usual routines. My name is Margaret Williams. At 68 years old, I've spent 4 decades building Williams Financial Group into one of Chicago's most respected wealth management firms. I started with nothing but determination, a night school accounting degree, and a refusal to accept the limitations others tried to place on me as a woman in finance in the early 1980s. Now I manage billions in assets, employ over 200 people, and serve clients across the country. I've counseled governors on their financial strategies and been named to most influential women in business lists so many times I've lost count. But at this moment, none of that mattered. As I sat in my living room waiting for my daughter to arrive, I was simply a grandmother grappling with a profound disappointment. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Emily had inherited my punctuality, if not my financial acumen. I opened the door to find not just Emily, but my son-in-law Richard as well, both wearing expressions of worried confusion. "Come in," I said, leading them to the living room where I'd set out coffee. "No wine tonight. I needed everyone clear-headed. "Mom, you're scaring us," Emily said, declining to sit. "What's going on with Tyler?" I handed them each a folder, containing the credit card statements Martin had sent over. "Your son stole my credit card information last weekend when he was helping with my computer. He spent over $5,000 on himself, gaming equipment, clothes, and a weekend at Grand Lakeside with some friends." Emily's face drained of color as she scanned the documents. Richard's jaw tightened as he reviewed the same information. "There must be some mistake," Emily said, her voice small. "Tyler wouldn't do this." "There's no mistake," I replied evenly. "The transaction started 30 minutes after he left my house on Sunday. The shipping addresses are to his apartment. And when my accountant tried calling the card company, they confirmed that the purchaser identified himself as Tyler Williams, purchasing on behalf of his grandmother." Richard sank onto the sofa, his expression hardening. "We'll pay you back. Immediately, Margaret. Every penny." "This isn't about the money," I said, though I appreciated his immediate offer. "This is about trust, about character. Tyler is 20 years old. Not a child making a mistake, but a young adult making a calculated decision to steal from his own grandmother." Emily was shaking her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I just can't believe he would do this. He adores you, Mom. You two have always had such a special relationship." That was true. Since the day Tyler was born, we'd shared a unique bond. His fascination with computers had aligned perfectly with my interest in incorporating new technologies into my business. As he grew, I'd taken him to industry conferences, introduced him to tech innovators, nurtured his talents. When he'd expressed interest in financial technology as a career path, I'd been thrilled. The internship at Williams Financial had been planned for years, a stepping stone to set him apart from his peers, to give him real-world experience that would complement his education. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I believed that too," I said, the weight of disappointment evident in my voice, "which makes this betrayal all the more painful." "What are you going to do?" Richard asked, always the practical one. I squared my shoulders. "I've already done it. I called Lawrence Peterson this afternoon." Emily's head snapped up. Lawrence was my company's HR director, a man known for his unwavering commitment to integrity and professional standards. "The internship is canceled," I continued. "I cannot and will not have someone on my team, family or not, who has demonstrated such a fundamental lack of ethics. My staff has been instructed to select another candidate from the applicant pool." "Mom, no!" Emily gasped. "You can't do that. This internship is crucial for his future. He's been talking about it for years." "Which makes his actions even more inexplicable," I replied. "He knowingly jeopardized an opportunity he claims to value by committing what amounts to fraud." Richard placed a calming hand on Emily's arm. "Margaret has every right to make this decision, Em. What Tyler did wasn't just wrong, it was illegal." Emily pulled away from him. "So we just destroy his future over one mistake? Mom, you know how competitive these positions are. If word gets out that he lost this opportunity, then that will be another consequence of his actions," I said firmly. "I built my company's reputation on trust and integrity. I cannot apply a different standard to my grandson than I would to any other person who committed fraud against me." "Have you even talked to him?" Emily demanded, anger now mixing with her distress. "Given him a chance to explain?" "No," I admitted. "I wanted to speak with you first, out of respect. But there is no explanation that would justify what he did." "I'm calling him," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "He needs to be part of this conversation." I didn't object. Perhaps it was time to hear what Tyler had to say for himself. The phone rang 4 times before Tyler's voice came through the speaker. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Tyler, Emily's voice was tight. "I'm at Grandma's house with Dad. You need to come here right now." A pause. I'm kind of in the middle of something." "Now, Tyler," Richard interjected, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We know about the credit card." The silence that followed told us everything we needed to know. No confusion, no questions, no denials, just the heavy quiet of someone caught red-handed. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he finally said, his voice noticeably subdued. While we waited, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Emily kept shooting me pleading looks, which I steadfastly ignored. I'd made my decision, and I wouldn't be swayed by emotional appeals. Richard, to his credit, seemed to understand my position, though I could tell he was concerned about the family rift this situation would create. 45 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. My housekeeper admitted Tyler, who shuffled into the living room looking nothing like the confident young man I'd hosted for dinner the previous weekend. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes downcast. "Sit down," I instructed, pointing to the chair directly across from mine. He complied without argument, his gaze fixed on the plush carpet. "Look at me, Tyler." Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet mine. What I saw wasn't remorse, not initially, it was calculation. He was already formulating his defense, his explanation, his path to minimizing consequences. "Explain yourself," I said simply. "Grandma, He began, then faltered. "I was planning to pay it back before you even noticed. It was just supposed to be a temporary thing." "A temporary theft?" I clarified. He winced. "I wouldn't call it theft." "What would you call taking someone's credit card information without their knowledge and using it to charge thousands of dollars?" I asked, my voice sharp. "I just needed to cover some expenses until my student loan payment comes through next month," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears, judging by his expression. These were things I was going to buy anyway. "A weekend at Grand Lakeside Resort was a necessary expense?" Richard asked incredulously. Tyler's face flushed. "It's Megan's birthday next weekend. I promised her something special, and everyone's going." Megan, the girlfriend of 3 months, who Tyler spoke about with the certainty of young love. The same girlfriend who, according to Emily's concerned comments over recent months, seemed to have expensive tastes and expectations. "So, you committed fraud to impress your girlfriend," I summarized. "Grandma, please," Tyler's voice cracked. "I know it was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. I'll pay back every cent. I'll work extra jobs if I have to." "Yes, you will," I agreed. "But there's something else you need to know. I've canceled your internship at Williams Financial." The blood drained from his face. "You... what? You can't do that." "I not only can, I have. The position has already been offered to another candidate. But I need that internship. It's the whole foundation for my career path, my graduate. School applications, everything." "You should have considered that before you stole from me," I said flatly. Tyler turned to his parents in desperation. "Mom, Dad, you can't let her do this. This is my future we're talking about." Emily looked torn, her maternal instinct to protect at war with the undeniable wrongness of what her son had done. "Tyler, what you did was very serious. There have to be consequences." "But not this. Ground me. Take away my car, whatever. But not the internship." His voice rose with panic. Richard shook his head. "This isn't about punishment, son. This is about trust. How could you possibly work at your grandmother's company after betraying her trust this way?" "I'd never do anything to hurt the company," Tyler protested. "This was different. This was personal." "That distinction only makes it worse," I pointed out. "You believed it was acceptable to steal from me personally while expecting me to trust you professionally?" Tyler slumped in his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. I'll do anything to fix this, Grandma, please. The internship means everything to me. If it meant everything to you, you wouldn't have risked it, I responded, though I took no pleasure in his distress. Actions have consequences, Tyler. This is a painful lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. What am I supposed to do now? He asked, his voice small. You'll repay every penny you charged to my card, I began. You'll find another internship for the summer, without using my name or connections, and you'll need to rebuild the trust you've broken, which will take considerably longer than repaying the money. Emily, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke up. Mom, I understand your position, I really do. But couldn't there be some middle ground? Maybe Tyler could work in a different department, with extra supervision? Or start with a probationary period? I shook my head. The decision is made, Emily. This isn't a negotiation. It's your company, but he's your grandson, she pressed. Doesn't family count for anything? Family is precisely why this matters so much, I countered. Would you have me teach him that family ties can be used to escape the consequences of unethical behavior? What lesson would that impart? The room fell silent. Tyler stared at his hands. Emily looked defeated, and Richard seemed resigned to the inevitability of my decision. I think we're done here, I finally said, standing to indicate the meeting was over. Tyler, I'll expect the first repayment next month. As they gathered their things to leave, Tyler lingered behind his parents. When they stepped into the foyer, he turned to me, his expression no longer calculating or defensive, just young and afraid. I really am sorry, Grandma, he said quietly. I know you probably don't believe me, but I am. I never meant to hurt you. I maintained my composure, though something in his vulnerability touched me. Intent doesn't erase impact, Tyler. Remember that. After they left, I poured myself another scotch and sat alone in my living room, the weight of the evening settling heavily on my shoulders. Had I been too harsh? Too unyielding? No. Firm boundaries were necessary here. Tyler needed to understand the seriousness of what he'd done. Still, the look in his eyes as he left haunted me more than I cared to admit. The next morning, I arrived. At my office earlier than usual, needing the comfort of familiar surroundings and the distraction of work. My assistant Vanessa, who had been with me for 15 years, immediately sensed something was wrong. Rough night? She asked, placing a cup of my preferred black coffee on my desk. Family matters, I replied tersely, not inviting further inquiry. She nodded understandingly and retreated to her desk, but returned moments later. Lawrence Peterson would like 5 minutes when you're available, regarding the internship situation. I sighed. Send him in. Lawrence entered carrying a folder, always with the folders, that man, and took a seat across from me. Margaret, I've processed the withdrawal of Tyler's internship offer as requested and extended an offer to Justin Chen, our second choice candidate. Good, I said. Justin had excellent recommendations, as I recall. He did, Lawrence confirmed. But I feel I should mention that the selection committee was quite surprised by your decision. Tyler's qualifications were exceptional. His qualifications weren't the issue, I said flatly. Lawrence nodded. I understand. However, as your HR director and someone who's worked with you for 20 years, may I speak frankly? I gestured for him to continue. This decision seems unusually rigid for you, Margaret. You've always been firm, but fair. I've seen you give second chances to valuable employees who made mistakes. This is different, I insisted. Because he's family? Lawrence asked pointedly. I didn't answer immediately, considering his question. Partially, I admitted. The personal betrayal compounds the professional concern. I understand that, he said carefully. But I also know how much you've talked about Tyler over the years. his potential, his unique way of looking at problems. You were genuinely excited to have him join the team. That was before he demonstrated a willingness to commit fraud, I reminded him. Lawrence leaned forward slightly. Margaret, what would you advise a client to do in this situation? If one of our high-net-worth clients came to you and described these exact circumstances with their grandchild, what counsel would you offer? It was a fair question, and one that gave me pause. What would I advise? Would I tell them to cut all professional ties, to create a rift that might never heal? Or would I suggest a more measured approach? I'd advise them to establish clear consequences while leaving a path to redemption, I admitted reluctantly. That's what I thought, Lawrence said, not smugly, but with gentle understanding. Perhaps there's a way to hold Tyler accountable while still giving him an opportunity to prove himself, to earn back your trust rather than lose it forever. He placed the folder on my desk and stood to leave. The offer to Justin hasn't been sent yet. I told my team I wanted to review it one more time, just in case you wanted to reconsider any aspects of this situation. After he left, I opened the folder to find not Justin Chen's acceptance paperwork, but a modified internship proposal, one that would place Tyler in our data security department, under our strictest manager, with a clearly defined probationary period and ethical guidelines he would need to meet. Lawrence had even included a draft contract specifically addressing financial propriety and the enhanced scrutiny Tyler would face. Clever man, Lawrence. Always thinking several steps ahead. I closed the folder without making a decision. This wasn't something to rush. I needed time to consider whether I was allowing my personal hurt to override my usually sound business judgment, or whether I was right to stand firm on such a fundamental breach of trust. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Mom, we need to talk more about this. Tyler is devastated. Please reconsider. I didn't respond. My daughter, always protective of her only child, couldn't see this situation objectively. The fact that Tyler was devastated was appropriate. He should be upset about what he'd done and its consequences. That was how people learned. I turned off my phone and immersed myself in work for the next several hours, reviewing investment strategies and preparing for an important client meeting the following day. It was nearly 6 when Vanessa knocked on my door. Sorry to interrupt, but Richard is here to see you. He says it's important. My son-in-law? That was unexpected. Richard rarely involved himself in family conflicts, preferring to support Emily while maintaining a neutral stance. Send him in, I said, curious about what had prompted this unusual visit. Richard entered, still in his surgeon's scrubs. He must have come directly from the hospital where he worked as an orthopedic specialist. Margaret, thank you for seeing me, he began, taking a seat. I know you're busy. What can I do for you, Richard? I asked, cutting to the chase. He took a deep breath. I want to talk about Tyler, but not in the way you might expect. I'm not here to plead his case or ask you to change your mind. That surprised me. Then why are you here? Because I understand your position better than Emily does, he said. And because I think there's context to Tyler's behavior that you should know about. I raised an eyebrow. Context doesn't justify theft. No, it doesn't, he agreed readily. What Tyler did was wrong, period. And there should be serious consequences. I nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement of the fundamental issue. But, Richard continued, Tyler has been struggling more than he's let on to any of us. His perfect GPA slipped last semester. He's been having anxiety attacks. And this relationship with Megan has become problematic. Problematic how? I asked, my attention fully engaged now. Richard sighed heavily. She's very status conscious, very focused on appearances. Tyler feels constant pressure to keep up with her lifestyle expectations. We've tried to talk to him about it, but he's 20 and thinks he's in love, I finished. Exactly. And I believe, though I can't prove, that the idea to use your card may not have been entirely his. I frowned. You think Megan suggested it? I think it's possible, Richard said carefully. There was an incident at Christmas where some cash went missing from Emily's purse when Megan was visiting. Tyler immediately offered to replace it, said he must have borrowed it without asking. We let it go, but looking back, this was new information and troubling. Not that it excused Tyler's actions, but it added a dimension I hadn't considered. Why are you telling me this, Richard? He met my gaze directly. Because I believe in consequences, Margaret. I support your decision to hold Tyler accountable. But I also know that at 20, making a terrible decision doesn't define who you are. It's how you respond to that mistake that matters. Tyler needs to learn from this, but he also needs a path forward. You sound like Lawrence, I remarked. Richard smiled slightly. Great minds. Look, Margaret, I'm not asking you to simply reinstate the internship as if nothing happened. But maybe there's a middle ground, one that holds him accountable while still giving him a chance to earn back your trust. I tapped my fingers on my desk, considering his words. I'll think about it, I finally said, not committing to anything. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with that response. That's all I ask. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing, Emily doesn't know I'm here. This was my decision. After Richard left, I sat alone in my office as the evening shadows lengthened. Outside my window, Chicago's lights began to illuminate the darkening sky, each one representing countless stories, countless decisions, countless turning points in people's lives. Was this one of those turning points for Tyler? For our relationship? For the kind of grandmother and person I wanted to be? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos from Tyler's high school graduation 2 years earlier. There he was, beaming in his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders. The pride in both our faces was unmistakable. I remembered how he'd insisted on taking that picture specifically with me, saying, "Grandma, you're the reason I'm going into financial technology. I want to be like you someday." Had that all been manipulation? I didn't believe so. The Tyler I knew, the real Tyler beneath this recent troubling behavior, was better than what he'd done. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out Lawrence's folder again, reviewing the modified internship proposal with more attention. It was well constructed, with clear parameters and safeguards. Tyler would be working under Diane Torres in data security, notoriously the most demanding manager in the company, someone who would accept nothing less than absolute integrity. He would have no access to financial systems initially. His probationary period would be twice as long as normal, and he would be required to complete an ethics course before starting. It wasn't forgiveness without consequences. It was a challenging path to redemption, one that would require real effort and growth on Tyler's part. I picked up my phone and dialed Emily's number. When she answered, her voice was guarded, prepared for another difficult conversation. "Mom, I was just about to call you. Is Tyler with you?" I asked. "No, he went back to his apartment. He's not in a good place right now." "I need to speak with him," I said. "Not tonight, but tomorrow. There are things we need to discuss." "What things?" Emily asked, hope creeping into her voice. "That's between Tyler and me," I replied, not ready to share my evolving thoughts. "Tell him to be at my office at 10 tomorrow morning. And Emily? Yes? This isn't over, but I'm considering a different approach." After we hung up, I called Lawrence, at home, something I rarely did, and asked him to be present for tomorrow's meeting. If we were going to create a path forward, it needed to be done properly, with clear expectations and professional oversight. That night, I slept better than I had since discovering Tyler's betrayal. Not because I had forgiven what he'd done, that would take time, but because I was finding my way back to a response that reflected my true values, not just my initial hurt and anger. The morning brought clarity and renewed purpose. As I prepared for my meeting with Tyler, I reminded myself of the core principles that had guided my life and business. Integrity, yes, but also fairness. Accountability, but also growth. Consequences, but also compassion. At precisely 10 o'clock, my assistant announced Tyler's arrival. When he entered my office, I was struck by the change in his appearance in just 2 days. His normally well-maintained appearance had deteriorated, hair uncombed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Sit down, Tyler," I instructed, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Lawrence sat to my right, silent but observant. Tyler sat, his posture tense, eyes wary. "Grandma, I held up a hand to stop him. "I'll speak first. What you did was not a mistake or an error in judgment. It was a deliberate act of theft and a profound breach of trust. It demonstrated a willingness to exploit our relationship for personal gain, and it calls into question your character and judgment." He nodded miserably, accepting my assessment without protest. "However," I continued, "I've been reminded that one terrible decision at 20 doesn't necessarily define who you are or who you can become. What defines you is how you respond when confronted with your failures." Hope flickered in his eyes, but he remained silent, waiting. "Lawrence has prepared a modified internship proposal," I said, sliding the folder across the desk. "It is not the position you were originally offered. It comes with significant restrictions, enhanced oversight, and a longer probationary period. You would be working under Diane Torres in data security." "Diane Torres?" Tyler repeated, his eyes widening slightly. He'd heard about her reputation, clearly. "Yes, you would have no access to financial systems initially. You would be required to complete a comprehensive ethics course before starting. And you would need to sign this contract." I tapped the document Lawrence had prepared, "which outlines specific ethical requirements and acknowledges that any further breach of trust will result in immediate termination with the full circumstances documented in your employment record." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "In addition, you will repay every cent charged to my card, plus interest, on a payment schedule you will propose and I will approve. You will volunteer 4 hours per week at the financial literacy program we sponsor for underprivileged youth, and you will write a detailed analysis of corporate ethics violations and their consequences, which you will present to the executive team at the end of your internship." Tyler swallowed hard. Are you offering me another chance?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to earn back my trust," I clarified. "It won't be easy. Diane won't go easy on you because you're my grandson. Quite the opposite. This path will require more work, more scrutiny, and more dedication than the original internship." "Why?" he asked, seemingly genuine in his confusion. "Why give me any chance at all after what I did?" It was a good question, one I'd spent considerable time reflecting on overnight. "Because I believe people can learn and grow from their worst decisions," I said. "Because despite what you did, I see your potential and value you as my grandson. And because someday, you may be in a position to make this same choice with someone else. And I want you to remember how it felt to be given a difficult but genuine path to redemption." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve this." "Perhaps not," I agreed. "But it's not about what you deserve. It's about who I choose to be and what I believe you can become." Lawrence, who had been quietly observing our exchange, spoke up. "This offer expires today, Tyler. You need to decide now if you're willing to accept these terms and commit fully to this process." Tyler straightened in his chair, wiping hastily at his eyes. "I accept. I'll do everything required and more. I promise I won't let you down again, Grandma." "Don't make promises you're not certain you can keep," I cautioned. Instead, show me through consistent actions that you understand the seriousness of what you did and are committed to rebuilding. Trust. He nodded solemnly. I understand. I stood, signaling that the formal part of our meeting was concluded. Lawrence will go over the specifics with you and have you sign the necessary paperwork. Your first ethics class starts tomorrow. Thank you, Grandma, Tyler said, standing as well. I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I am truly sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for betraying you in the first place. I nodded, acknowledging his words without offering immediate absolution. Actions will speak louder than apologies, Tyler. Show me who you really are. As Lawrence led Tyler out to review the documents, I turned to look out my office window at the city below. This situation was far from resolved. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily or quickly. The coming months would reveal whether Tyler was truly committed to earning back what he'd lost, or if this contrition was merely a response to consequences. But I had created a path forward, one that honored both justice and mercy, both accountability and opportunity for growth. In doing so, I remained true to the principles that had guided my life and business, that integrity matters, that actions have consequences, but also that people deserve the chance to learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. As a businesswoman, as a grandmother, and as a human being navigating the complex terrain of betrayal and forgiveness, I could do no less. 2 weeks into Tyler's modified internship, I received the first progress report from Diane Torres. I was in my car, being driven home after a particularly grueling board meeting, when the email notification appeared on my phone. I hesitated before opening it, surprised by my own nervousness. I had instructed Diane to be completely honest in her assessments, to show no favoritism, to hold Tyler to the highest possible standard. Now I found myself wondering if I had set him up for failure. The subject line was characteristically blunt. T. Williams, initial assessment. I took a deep breath and opened it. Margaret, the email began. Your grandson has completed his first 2 weeks in data security. As requested, here is my unvarnished evaluation. I scrolled down, bracing myself. Tyler possesses exceptional technical skills, as expected from his academic background. His analytical abilities are above average for an intern. He consistently arrives early, stays late, and has completed all assigned tasks within deadline. So far, so good. But Diane was known for delivering the positives before the devastating critique. I continued reading. Regarding the trust issues you mentioned, I have observed no red flags. He has followed all security protocols to the letter, even when doing so created extra work for him. When given access to test data that could have been manipulated without immediate detection, he followed proper procedures instead of taking shortcuts. I felt a small wave of relief, which I quickly tempered. 2 weeks wasn't enough time to declare victory. His interaction with the team has been appropriate but reserved. He appears aware that he needs to earn his place here and doesn't expect special treatment. Several team members have commented on his willingness to take on tedious tasks without complaint. Diane's final paragraph was the most telling. In summary, T. Williams is demonstrating the behavior of someone who understands he has something to prove. Whether this is sustainable long-term remains to be seen. I will continue to observe closely and report any concerns immediately. For now, I cautiously consider this a positive start. Diane. I reread the email twice more, searching for hidden criticism or warning signs between the lines. Finding none, I allowed myself a moment of qualified optimism. It wasn't vindication, far from it, but it was a beginning. When I arrived home, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a check from Tyler, the first installment of his repayment plan. It was more than the minimum we had agreed upon, with a brief note. First payment. Thank you for the second chance. Simple, straightforward, without excessive emotion or promises. Appropriate. I placed the check in my desk drawer, next to the folder where I was keeping all documentation related to this situation. Evidence of actions, not words. That's what I needed from Tyler now. My phone rang. It was Emily. Our relationship had been strained since the credit card incident, with brief, formal conversations replacing our usual easy rapport. She was struggling to balance loyalty to her son with understanding of my position. "Hi, Mom," she said when I answered. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course. I wanted to let you know that Tyler broke up with Megan last night." This was unexpected news. "I see. Was it his decision?" "Yes," Emily replied. "He said he needed to focus on rebuilding what matters, and that the relationship wasn't healthy for him." I absorbed this information silently. While I never would have demanded he end the relationship, I had my suspicions about Megan's influence on his poor decision-making. "How is he handling it?" I asked. "Better than I expected," Emily admitted. "He seems different lately. More serious, more focused. Whatever Diane Torres is putting him through at work, it seems to be having an effect." "That's good to hear." There was a pause before Emily continued. "Mom, I owe you an apology. I was so focused on protecting Tyler that I didn't fully acknowledge how much he hurt you. What he did was wrong, and your response was fair. More than fair, actually." Her words loosened something in my chest that had been tight for weeks. "Thank you, Emily. That means a lot." "Dad always said you were the toughest person he knew, but also the fairest," she said, referring to my late husband. He was right. After we hung up, I sat in my study contemplating this new development. Tyler breaking up with Megan represented another concrete action, a choice to remove a negative influence from his life. Like the positive work assessment and the timely repayment, it was a data point suggesting genuine change rather than temporary compliance. The following Sunday was our monthly family dinner, a tradition I had maintained since my husband's passing 5 years earlier. Given recent events, I had considered canceling or postponing, but ultimately decided that maintaining normalcy was important. I did, however, wonder if Tyler would attend. At precisely 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My housekeeper admitted Emily and Richard, followed by Tyler, who carried a small gift bag. The usual kisses and greetings were exchanged, though with a palpable undercurrent of tension. When Tyler approached me, he didn't attempt the usual hug, seeming unsure of his welcome. Instead, he extended the gift bag. "This isn't part of the repayment," he clarified quickly. "It's just something I thought you might like." Curious, I opened the bag and removed a small, elegantly framed photograph. It showed my late husband and me on our 30th wedding anniversary, dancing together at the party our children had thrown for us. It was a moment of pure joy captured perfectly. Henry looking at me with that particular expression that had always made me feel like the only woman in the world. "I found it when I was going through old photos," Tyler explained. "I don't think you've seen this one before. I had it restored and framed." I studied the photograph, genuinely touched. It was a thoughtful gift, personal without being presumptuous, acknowledging our history without trying to gloss over recent events. "Thank you, Tyler. This is very meaningful to me." He nodded, still maintaining a respectful distance. "Grandpa always said you were the best dancer he ever knew." The mention of Henry's voice brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Your grandfather had many wonderful qualities, but honesty about my dancing ability wasn't one of them," I replied, earning a small smile from Tyler. Dinner proceeded with careful conversation. We discussed Emily's work at the university, Richard's new research project, and neutral topics like the unseasonably warm spring Chicago was experiencing. No one mentioned the credit card incident, the internship, or anything related to those fraught topics. As dessert was being served, Tyler cleared his throat. I'd like to say something, if that's okay. All eyes turned to him. He looked nervous, but determined. I know we've been avoiding the elephant in the room, and maybe that's been necessary. But I want to acknowledge that I created this situation, and I'm committed to making it right. Not just through the formal arrangements we've made, but by proving through my actions that I understand the seriousness of what I did. Emily reached for his hand, but he gently pulled away. This is important, Mom. I need to say this. He turned back to me. Grandma, I betrayed your trust in the worst way. There's no excuse for that. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I know that. Has to be earned over time. But I am grateful for the opportunity to try. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. I nodded, accepting his words without needing to add any of my own. After dinner, while Emily and Richard helped my housekeeper clear the table, over her protests, Tyler asked if we could speak privately. I led him to my study, where so many difficult conversations had taken place over the years. How is the internship going? I asked, taking a seat in my favorite leather chair. It's challenging, he admitted, sitting across from me. Diane is intense, but I'm learning a lot. She speaks highly of your technical skills. Tyler looked surprised. She does? She certainly doesn't say that to me. Diane believes praise should be earned and delivered sparingly, I explained. The fact that she mentioned your skills at all is significant. He absorbed this information with a thoughtful nod. There's something I wanted to discuss with you, he said. It's about the ethics course. The course was a comprehensive program taught by a former SEC investigator, covering everything from regulatory compliance to ethical decision-making. Frameworks. It was rigorous, designed for mid-career professionals rather than interns. Is it too difficult? I asked. No, not at all, Tyler replied quickly. Actually, it's fascinating. Professor Abernathy has this way of presenting ethical dilemmas that makes you really examine your own thought processes. Then what's the issue? There's no issue. He hesitated. We were discussing the psychology of unethical behavior, how people rationalize their actions, the slippery slope from small compromises to major violations. And I realized that's exactly what happened with me. I leaned forward slightly, intrigued by this self-reflection. It started small, he continued. Taking your card information seemed like borrowing, not stealing, because in my mind, I was definitely going to pay it back before you noticed. I told myself it wasn't really wrong because you could afford it, because we're family, because it was temporary. His candor was surprising and compelling. Classic rationalization, I observed. Exactly. And once I'd justified that first step, each purchase became easier to rationalize. The gaming equipment was something I needed for school. The clothes were for interviews. The resort weekend was because everyone was going and I didn't want to be left out. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me painfully of his grandfather. Professor Abernathy calls it ethical fading, when the ethical dimensions of a decision fade from view because we've clouded them with justifications. I nodded. It's a common human failing. The question is, what do you do with this insight? That's why I wanted to talk to you, Tyler said, his expression earnest. I'd like to develop an ethics module specifically for younger employees and interns, based on what I'm learning. Something that addresses the particular pressures and rationalizations people my age might face. This was unexpected. Go on. We're constantly bombarded with messages about deserving luxury items, about experiences we shouldn't miss out on, about projecting success even before we've achieved it. Add in student debt, social media pressure, and the fear of falling behind, and it creates a perfect storm for ethical compromises. His analysis was astute and painfully applicable to his own situation. What would this module entail? I asked. Case studies relevant to young professionals, practical decision-making frameworks, recognition of warning signs when you're starting to rationalize unethical behavior. His eyes were bright with genuine enthusiasm. Professor Abernathy thinks it has potential. He's willing to advise me if you approve the project. I studied my grandson, seeing something I hadn't fully appreciated before. Not just remorse, but the beginnings of genuine growth. He was taking his mistake and attempting to transform it into something constructive, something that might prevent others from making similar errors. Write up a formal proposal, I said. Include objectives, methodology, required resources, and anticipated outcomes. Submit it through proper channels, not directly to me. Thank you, Grandma, he said, the relief in his voice palpable. I will. This doesn't change our existing arrangement, I reminded him. The repayment plan, the probationary period, all of that remains in place. Of course, he agreed readily. This would be in addition to those requirements, not instead of them. As our conversation concluded, I felt something I hadn't expected, a spark of pride. Not pride in what Tyler had done, but in how he was responding to the consequences, with reflection, responsibility, and a desire to create something meaningful from his failure. The following weeks brought further evidence of Tyler's commitment. His second payment arrived early, again exceeding the minimum required amount. Diane's progress reports remained cautiously positive, noting his consistent performance and growing contributions to the team. The ethics course instructor sent an unsolicited email praising Tyler's engagement and insightful participation. Small steps, but in the right direction. Then came the incident that truly tested Tyler's newfound ethical compass. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my private line rang, the one reserved for urgent matters. It was Diane Torres. Margaret, I need to inform you of a situation involving Tyler, she began, her tone unreadable. My grip tightened on the phone. What's happened? There was a security breach attempt on one of our test systems today. Nothing serious, a fairly standard penetration testing scenario that we use to identify vulnerabilities. I waited for the other shoe to drop. The system flagged unusual access patterns from Connor Reeves's workstation. Connor is one of our junior analysts, been with us about 8 months. The name was vaguely familiar, a promising young hire who had joined the company recently. What does this have to do with Tyler? I asked. Tyler discovered the breach, Diane explained. He was reviewing log files as part of his assigned tasks and noticed the anomaly. Standard protocol would be to report it directly to me, but given the sensitive nature, potentially a colleague attempting unauthorized access, he followed the enhanced security protocol instead, reporting it to both me and compliance simultaneously, with full documentation. My concern shifted to confusion. That sounds like correct procedure. What's the issue? The issue is that Connor and Tyler have become friends. They eat lunch together, they're both into the same online games, they've been to some industry meetup together. This wasn't reporting on a stranger, this was reporting on a friend. I began to understand the significance. How did Tyler handle it? With complete professionalism, Diane said, and I could hear the rare note of approval in her voice. He documented everything meticulously, reported through proper channels, and recused himself from the investigation due to the personal connection. He didn't warn Connor, didn't modify the logs, didn't do anything to protect his friend at the expense of company security. Relief washed over me. And Connor? He admitted to experimenting with some unauthorized access techniques, claiming it was just curiosity, not malicious intent. HR and legal are reviewing the case now to determine appropriate action. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, processing this development. It was one thing for Tyler to follow rules when they were abstract, another entirely to maintain integrity when it affected someone he cared about. Many young people, many people of any age for that matter, would have found ways to protect a friend, to warn them, to blur the evidence. The fact that Tyler had chosen ethical behavior over loyalty to a peer was significant. I was still contemplating this when an email arrived from Tyler himself. "Grandma, I wanted you to hear this directly from me, though I'm sure Diane has already reported the incident with Connor. This was incredibly difficult. Connor was becoming a good friend. We clicked immediately when I joined the team. I'm writing to assure you that I followed all protocols exactly as established. When I discovered the suspicious activity, I was initially in disbelief. My first instinct was to talk to him directly, to see if there was an explanation. That would have been the easier path. But then I remembered what Professor Abernathy discussed about ethical crossroads, those moments where we face a clear choice between right and wrong, often with significant personal cost attached to doing the right thing. This was my crossroad. I chose to follow the security protocols without exception. I don't know what will happen to Connor. Part of me hopes there's a reasonable explanation, or at least mitigating factors. But that's not my decision to make. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, in a way I didn't before, how one compromise can lead to many others, and how integrity sometimes requires difficult choices. Tyler." I read the email twice, struck by its maturity and insight. This was not the same young man who had so casually violated my trust just 2 months earlier. That person had been willing to compromise his integrity for concert tickets and a weekend at a resort. This person was willingly accepting the personal cost of doing the right thing. 2 days later, I received the formal proposal for Tyler's ethics module for young professionals. It was thorough, well-researched, and practical, focusing on real-world scenarios rather than abstract principles. He had included input from Professor Abernathy and had aligned the objectives with our company's existing ethics framework. Most striking was the section where he proposed using his own case, anonymized, of course, as one of the central teaching examples. He would share his rationalization process, the choices that led to his ethical failure, and the consequences he faced. It was a bold choice to incorporate his own mistake so explicitly. I forwarded the proposal to Lawrence with a simple note. "Your thoughts?" His response came within the hour. "This has merit, well beyond what I expected, worth pursuing if you're comfortable with it." After careful consideration, I approved the project with one condition. Tyler would need to develop it entirely on his own time, not during work hours. His primary responsibility remained his internship duties. He readily agreed. The Connor situation resolved with a formal warning and mandatory additional training. The investigation had determined that while his actions violated company policy, there was no malicious intent or data compromise. The fact that he had immediately admitted his actions and been fully cooperative had worked in his favor. Tyler maintained appropriate professional distance throughout the process, neither advocating for Connor nor participating in the investigation. It was only after the matter was formally concluded that he approached me about it. "I'm relieved Connor is getting another chance," he said during one of our now regular Sunday dinners. "I was worried he might be terminated." "His situation was different from yours," I pointed out. "He made a poor decision driven by curiosity, but he didn't deliberately attempt to deceive anyone or use his position for personal gain." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I understand the distinction. Still, I'm glad the company considers context and intent, not just actions." "Justice without mercy isn't justice at all," I said, quoting something my husband used to say. "But mercy without accountability isn't mercy, it's indulgence." "That's profound," Tyler said, genuinely impressed. "Was that Grandpa's saying?" It was. He had a unique way of distilling complex ethical principles into simple statements. I smiled at the memory. "He would have been devastated by what you did, Tyler. But I think he would be proud of how you're handling the aftermath." It was the first time I had explicitly acknowledged his progress, and I could see how deeply it affected him. His eyes grew bright with unshed tears, but he quickly composed himself. "I hope so," he said simply. 3 months into Tyler's probationary period, I received a call from Diane Torres requesting a meeting. She rarely asked for face-to-face time unless something significant was happening, so I immediately made room in my schedule. She arrived at my office precisely on time, as always, carrying her ever-present tablet loaded with data and metrics. "Margaret," she began after declining my offer of coffee, "I've completed the quarterly assessment of Tyler's performance." "And?" I prompted when she didn't immediately continue. "He's exceeded all technical benchmarks. His project work is consistently high quality. His documentation is meticulous. He's developed 2 security enhancements that we're implementing across the system." I nodded, pleased but not surprised given the trajectory of his previous reports. "But that's not why I asked for this meeting," Diane continued. "We have a situation that requires a decision." My guard immediately went up. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that represents opportunity," she replied. "Specifically, an opportunity for Tyler." She explained that our Singapore office was launching an enhanced security protocol and needed someone from the Chicago team to assist with implementation. The assignment would last 2 weeks and would involve working directly with senior leadership in the Asia-Pacific region. "Typically, we would send someone with more experience," Diane said. "But given the specific nature of the security enhancements, which Tyler helped develop, he would be the most knowledgeable team member for this particular assignment." I immediately saw the dilemma. This was a prestigious opportunity, one that would significantly enhance Tyler's resume and professional development. Under normal circumstances, it would be an easy decision to send him. But these weren't normal circumstances. "You're concerned about sending him given his probationary status," I surmised. "Yes," Diane confirmed. "On one hand, his work merits this opportunity. On the other hand, his probationary period isn't complete, and this assignment would involve greater autonomy and responsibility than his current role." I considered the implications carefully. "What's your recommendation?" Diane Torres was not someone who hesitated to give her opinion, yet she paused now. "If we were evaluating solely on merit and demonstrated performance, Tyler would be the clear choice for this assignment. But there are other factors to consider. Such as whether sending him sends the wrong message to the organization about consequences for ethical violations. Such as whether 2 weeks in Singapore with minimal direct supervision is an appropriate test at this stage of his redemption process." These were valid concerns, ones I shared. "And yet," Diane continued, "there's also the question of whether continuing to limit his responsibilities despite consistently excellent performance undermines the very concept of earning a second chance. At what point do we acknowledge genuine change?" It was a philosophical question as much as a practical one, and it cut to the heart of the situation. If we truly believed in redemption, in the possibility of learning from mistakes and becoming better, then we had to be willing to recognize when that process was occurring. If it were anyone else with Tyler's performance metrics and 3 months of consistently ethical behavior, I asked, "would you recommend them for this assignment?" "Without hesitation," Diane replied. "And if something were to go wrong, if he were to misuse this opportunity in some way, what safeguards would be in place?" "The same as for any employee: regular check-ins, documentation requirements, oversight from the Singapore team lead. Plus, I've added enhanced monitoring of system access and financial approvals, given the history." I nodded, appreciating her thoroughness. "Have you discussed this possibility with Tyler?" "No," she said. "I wanted to consult with you first, given the unique circumstances." I stood and walked to the window, gathering my thoughts. Below, Chicago stretched out in its organized grid, the lake shimmering in the distance. I had built my company on certain principles: excellence, integrity, accountability, but also growth, opportunity, and yes, second chances when they were truly earned. The question wasn't whether Tyler deserved this opportunity based on his past actions. He didn't. The question was whether he had earned it through his current actions, his consistent demonstration of changed behavior. Let me talk to him, I decided. His response will help determine whether he's ready for this level of responsibility. Diane nodded, seemingly satisfied with this approach. I'll need an answer by tomorrow afternoon to make the arrangements. After she left, I called Tyler and asked him to come to my office after work. He arrived promptly at 6, still in his business attire, but with a questioning look on his face. Is everything all right, Grandma? He asked as he took a seat. Everything is fine, I assured him. Diane has brought an opportunity to my attention that concerns you. I explained the Singapore assignment, watching his expression carefully as I outlined the details. His initial reaction was predictable excitement. This was the type of opportunity young professionals dream about. But then, interestingly, his expression sobered. Given my situation, he said slowly, would this be appropriate? I'm still on probation. The fact that he recognized this tension without prompting was telling. That's the question we're considering, I acknowledged. Diane believes you're technically the best person for this assignment, but there are other factors to weigh. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. I understand, and I appreciate being considered, regardless of the decision. Before we make that decision, I said, I'd like to hear your perspective. Do you believe you're ready for this level of responsibility? He didn't answer immediately, which I found reassuring. A quick yes would have suggested a lack of thoughtful consideration. Technically, yes, he finally said. I know the security enhancements intimately, and I'm confident in my ability to support the implementation. And ethically? I pressed. He met my gaze directly. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have trusted myself with this. I would have said the right things, but inside, I would have seen it as a sign that the consequences weren't that serious after all. His candor was striking. And now? I prompted. Now I understand that trust is rebuilt in small increments over time. I believe I've made progress, but I also recognize that complete restoration takes longer than 3 months. He paused. If you decide I'm not ready for this opportunity, I'll understand completely and continue focusing on my current responsibilities. It was perhaps the most mature response he could have given, acknowledging both his progress and the reality that redemption is a process, not an event. And if we do send you? I asked. What safeguards would you suggest to ensure this opportunity is handled appropriately? Again, he took time to consider his answer. I would propose daily progress reports rather than the standard weekly ones, complete transparency about all activities and expenses, and perhaps a local mentor in the Singapore office who is fully briefed on my background and can provide additional oversight. His suggestions went beyond what Diane had proposed, indicating a genuine commitment to accountability. It was another data point suggesting real growth. Thank you for your thoughtful response, I said. Diane needs an answer by tomorrow afternoon. I'll let you know our decision before then. After he left, I sat in my office considering all aspects of the situation. The easy decision would be to say no, to continue the established restrictions until the full probationary period was complete. It would be defensible, conservative, safe. But would it be right? Tyler had consistently demonstrated changed behavior. He had met or exceeded every requirement we had established. He had shown ethical courage in difficult situations. He had acknowledged his wrongdoing and worked to make amends, not just through required restitution, but through additional efforts like the ethics module. At some point, continued restriction despite earned trust becomes punitive rather than rehabilitative. It undermines the very purpose of offering a path to redemption in the first place. I made my decision. The Singapore skyline glittered through the window of my executive suite at the Marina Bay Hotel. I had arrived yesterday, ostensibly for our annual Asia-Pacific Leadership Summit, but with another purpose in mind, one I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Lawrence. I was here to observe Tyler. My decision to approve his assignment had raised eyebrows among certain members of the executive team. While no one questioned his technical qualifications, sending a probationary employee overseas for a high-profile project was unusual. I had assured them that appropriate safeguards were in place, that Diane Torres had personally signed off on the assignment, and that Tyler had earned the opportunity through consistently excellent performance. What I hadn't told them was that I would be personally verifying that assessment. My original plan hadn't included being in Singapore at the same time as Tyler. The regional summit had been scheduled for the following month, but when an unexpected regulatory change prompted us to move it earlier, I saw an opportunity. I would attend the summit as planned and use the overlap to quietly observe how Tyler conducted himself away from home, away from direct supervision, away from the watchful eyes of those who knew his history. Tyler had been in Singapore for 4 days now. His daily reports, which I had reviewed each morning, were detailed and professional. The Singapore team lead had sent positive feedback about his contributions. Everything on paper suggested the decision to send him had been the right one. But I needed to see for myself. I checked my watch, 7:30 a.m. According to Tyler's schedule, he would be attending a security implementation breakfast meeting at 8 a.m. in the main office downtown. I had arranged to arrive coincidentally around 8:30, ostensibly for a tour of the facilities before my own meetings began. As my driver navigated the morning traffic, I scrolled through emails on my phone, finding the latest update from Diane. Implementation proceeding ahead of schedule, she noted. Tyler's recommendations for protocol adjustments have been adopted by the Singapore team. No issues to report. The Williams Financial Group Asia-Pacific headquarters occupied 3 floors of a sleek high-rise in the financial district. As I entered the building, I felt the familiar pride in seeing our company logo displayed prominently in the lobby. From humble beginnings in Chicago to international presence, it had been quite a journey. The receptionist recognized me immediately, despite my infrequent visits to this office. "Mrs. Williams, what an honor. We weren't expecting you until 10 GAC for your meeting with Mr. Chen." "I thought I'd come early and see the operation in action," I explained. "Is the security implementation meeting still in progress?" "Yes, ma'am. 23rd floor, main conference room. Shall I escort you?" "That won't be necessary," I assured her, accepting the visitor badge she offered. "I know the way." The elevator whisked me upward, giving me a moment to consider exactly what I hoped to observe. Was I looking for evidence of continued growth and responsibility? Or was I, if I were truly honest with myself, secretly expecting to find some mistake, some slip that would confirm my lingering doubts about Tyler's transformation? I pushed the uncomfortable thought aside as the doors opened. The glass walls of the conference room afforded me a clear view of the meeting in progress. 8 people sat around the table, laptops open, engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. Tyler was among them, gesturing at something on the screen in front of him, clearly mid-explanation. I approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Through the glass, I could hear his voice, confident but not domineering, explaining a technical concept in terms the non-specialist could grasp. "The key vulnerability isn't in the password protocols themselves," he was saying. "It's in the transition points between systems. That's where we've focused our enhanced encryption, creating seamless security even when data is moving between platforms." The Singapore team was nodding, following his explanation. One woman, who I recognized as their head of operations, asked a pointed question about implementation timelines. "That's where these staggered rollout phases come in," Tyler replied, pulling up a detailed chart on the main screen. "We've designed it to minimize disruption to daily operations while maximizing protection of sensitive data from day one." His presentation was polished, professional, and thorough. Exactly what one would expect from a Williams Financial Group representative. No hint of the entitled young man who had once thought nothing of stealing his grandmother's credit card. Information. I was about to slip away, satisfied with what I'd observed, when the meeting facilitator noticed me through the glass. "Mrs. Williams!" he exclaimed, rising quickly. What an unexpected honor. All heads turned in my direction, including Tyler's. I saw the brief flash of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by professional composure. There was nothing to do but enter the room gracefully. "Please, don't let me interrupt. I'm just here for the regional summit and thought I'd observe some of the security implementation work." The Singapore team leader, David Chen, immediately offered me a seat. "We're delighted to have you join us. Tyler was just walking us through the enhanced security protocols your Chicago team has developed." I nodded, taking the offered chair. "Please continue." Tyler recovered quickly, returning to his presentation without missing a beat. As I was explaining, the phased implementation allows us to address the most critical vulnerabilities first, while minimizing workflow disruption. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him field complex questions, navigate technical challenges, and collaborate effectively with the Singapore team. His knowledge was impressive, his communication clear, his demeanor professional. When the meeting concluded, Tyler gathered his materials efficiently, exchanging a few follow-up comments with team members as they dispersed. Only when the room had emptied did he approach me. "Grandmother," he said formally, aware of our professional setting. "I didn't know you were going to be in Singapore." "The regional summit was moved up," I explained. "I arrived yesterday." He nodded, processing this information. "Will you be here for the entire 2 weeks of the implementation?" "No, just 3 days for the summit. I thought I'd observe some of the security work while I'm here." A slight tension appeared in his shoulders. Understandable, given that my presence likely felt like additional scrutiny. "Of course. I hope what you've seen so far meets your expectations." "It does," I confirmed. "Your presentation was excellent, thorough and accessible, even to those without technical backgrounds." Relief crossed his features briefly. "Thank you. The team here has been incredibly collaborative. They've actually improved on some of our initial protocols." "David speaks highly of your contributions," I noted. He accepted the compliment with a simple nod, neither dismissing it nor showing excessive pride. It was the response of a professional who took his work seriously. "I have meetings throughout the day," I said, "but perhaps we could have dinner this evening? I'd like to hear more about the implementation progress." "I'd like that," he replied, "though I should mention I've scheduled a working dinner with the security architecture team tonight to address some questions that came up during implementation." "Tomorrow then," I suggested. "Tomorrow would be perfect," he agreed. As I walked to my next meeting, I reflected on our brief interaction. Tyler hadn't tried to leverage our personal relationship in the professional setting. He hadn't shown any resentment at my unexpected appearance or exhibited anxiety about additional oversight. Instead, he had maintained appropriate boundaries, demonstrated competence, and prioritized his work responsibilities over a dinner with his grandmother. All signs of professional maturity. My meetings kept me occupied throughout the day, but my thoughts periodically returned to Tyler. I had come to Singapore partially to reassure myself that my decision to send him had been sound. What I had observed this morning suggested it had been more than sound. It had been the right call for both the company and for Tyler's professional development. That evening, back in my hotel suite, I received an email from Tyler confirming our dinner plans for the following evening. Attached was his daily implementation report, as detailed and comprehensive as the previous ones, despite knowing I was now physically present in Singapore. No corners cut, no details glossed over. Another positive data point. The next day was filled with summit activities, leaving me little time to check on the security implementation. It was nearly 7 p.m. when I returned to my hotel to freshen up before dinner with Tyler. We had agreed to meet at a restaurant in the hotel, a well-regarded establishment serving traditional Singaporean cuisine. Tyler arrived precisely on time, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, professional but not overly formal. He had always had good instincts for appropriate attire, something I had appreciated about him even before all this. After we were seated and had ordered, I steered the conversation toward his experience in Singapore. "How are you finding the city?" I asked. "Fascinating," he replied. "The efficiency of their systems is remarkable. Transportation, public services, even the way the office buildings are designed for optimal energy use. It's given me some ideas about potential improvements for our Chicago operations." Such as? He outlined several thoughtful observations about integrated security systems and workspace design that demonstrated not just technical understanding, but a broader perspective on organizational efficiency. "You've been paying attention to more than just your assigned task," I noted with approval. "The security implementation is my primary focus," he clarified. "But it seems wasteful to visit a world-class financial hub and not learn everything possible while I'm here." Our food arrived: chili crab for me, black pepper prawns for Tyler. We paused our conversation as the server arranged the dishes, then resumed once we were alone again. "David tells me you've been working late every night," I commented, testing, to see how he would respond. "The timeline is ambitious," Tyler acknowledged, "and I want to ensure everything is properly documented for the team here before I leave. They'll be maintaining these systems long after I'm gone." "Commendable," I said, "but don't burn yourself out. Effectiveness diminishes with exhaustion." He smiled slightly. "Sound advice. Though I recall a certain CEO who regularly worked 18-hour days when launching her company." It was a gentle reference to stories I had shared with him over the years about my early career. Stories meant to illustrate the value of hard work, not to encourage unhealthy habits. "And that? CEO would tell you she made mistakes during those years that adequate rest might have prevented," I countered. Our conversation flowed easily from there, touching on various aspects of the Singapore operation, developments at the Chicago office, and Tyler's observations about international business practices. It was the kind of substantive discussion I might have with any promising young executive in my company: professional but engaged, focused but not rigid. It wasn't until dessert arrived that Tyler shifted to a more personal topic. "May I ask you something, grandmother?" "Of course." He set down his spoon, his expression serious. "Why did you really come to Singapore now? Was it truly just a coincidence of scheduling, or was it to check up on me?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. My instinct was to offer the polite fiction, that it was merely a convenient overlap in our schedules. But something about his straightforward inquiry deserved an equally straightforward response. "Both," I admitted. "The summit was moved up for legitimate business reasons, but once I knew the dates overlapped with your assignment, I saw an opportunity to observe how you were handling the responsibility." He nodded, accepting this truth without visible offense. "And what have you observed?" "Professionalism, competence, appropriate boundaries, thorough work." I met his gaze directly. In short, exactly what I would expect from any Williams Financial Group representative. Relief crossed his features, quickly replaced by resolve. "That's what I've been striving for, not just to meet expectations, but to exceed them. To prove that your decision to give me this chance wasn't a mistake." "It wasn't," I confirmed. "Though I'll admit I came partly to reassure myself of that fact." He accepted this with a thoughtful nod. "I understand. Trust takes time to rebuild. I don't expect everything to go back to how it was before." "What I did." "Nor should it," I said firmly. "The relationship we had before was based on an incomplete understanding of each other. Whatever relationship we build going forward will be more authentic precisely because it acknowledges both our strengths and our failings." Tyler considered this. "I like that perspective. Not trying to recapture what was lost, but building something new, something better. We finished our meal discussing lighter topics, the unusual fruits available in Singapore's markets, the spectacular gardens by the bay that Tyler had visited briefly over the weekend, the differences between Singapore's and Chicago's architecture. As we parted in the hotel lobby, Tyler thanked me for dinner and added, "I'm glad you're here, grandmother," even if part of the reason was to check up on me. His smile held no resentment, only understanding. "I'll see you at the closing demonstration on Friday," I said. "David tells me you'll be leading the presentation for the executive team." "Yes," he confirmed. "We'll be showcasing the completed implementation and the enhanced security metrics. I look forward to it." As I watched him walk away, his posture straight, his pace purposeful, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just relief that my decision had been vindicated, but genuine pride in the professional he was becoming. The remainder of my time in Singapore passed quickly, filled with summit meetings and regional briefings. I saw Tyler only in passing, exchanging brief professional greetings in the office hallways. From David and other team members, I continued to hear positive reports about his work and his integration with the Singapore team. Friday arrived, my final day in Singapore and the day of the security implementation presentation to the executive team. I took my seat in the boardroom alongside other senior leaders, notepad ready, preparing to evaluate the presentation as I would any other professional briefing. Tyler entered with David and 2 other team members, setting up their materials with efficient coordination. When David introduced Tyler as the lead presenter, there was no mention of our relationship, just his role as security implementation specialist from the Chicago office. The presentation was flawless. Tyler walked us through the enhanced security protocols, the implementation process, the metrics showing improved protection, and the training provided to ensure ongoing compliance. He fielded complex questions from seasoned executives with confidence and clarity, deferring to Singapore team members when appropriate and acknowledging areas where further refinements were planned. It was the performance of a seasoned professional, not an intern on probation. When the presentation concluded, our Asia-Pacific CEO, James Wong, turned to me. "Your Chicago team has developed an impressive security framework, Margaret. We're fortunate to have had such knowledgeable support for the implementation." "Indeed," I agreed, allowing myself a small moment of pride, both in the company's achievements and in Tyler's contribution to them. After the meeting dispersed, I approached Tyler as he was gathering his materials. "Excellent presentation," I said simply. "Thank you," he replied. "The team here made it easy. They've been incredibly collaborative throughout the process." "Take the compliment, Tyler," I advised. "False modesty doesn't serve you or acknowledge the hard work you've put into this project." He smiled slightly. "Old habits. I'm still working on finding the balance between confidence and arrogance." It was a surprisingly insightful comment, one that showed self-awareness I wouldn't have credited him with 6 months ago. "You found it today," I assured him. "Safe travels back to Chicago next week. We'll discuss your next assignment when you return." His eyes showed a flash of curiosity at that statement, but he simply nodded professionally. "I look forward to it. Safe travels to you as well, grandmother." I left Singapore that evening, my assessment of Tyler's progress solidified by what I had observed firsthand. The gamble of sending him on this assignment had paid off, not just for the company, which had benefited from his technical skills, but for Tyler himself, who had risen to meet the responsibility he had been given. Upon my return to Chicago, I called Lawrence into my office for a debriefing. After updating him on the summit outcomes, I turned to the subject of Tyler. "The Singapore assignment was a success," I told him. "Not just the technical implementation, but Tyler's performance. Specifically, David's team was impressed. James Wong specifically mentioned the quality of the work, and I personally observed Tyler conducting himself with complete professionalism." Lawrence nodded, unsurprised. His work here has been consistently excellent. Diane says he's become one of her most reliable team members. What's your assessment of his progress overall? I asked. Lawrence considered the question carefully, as was his habit with personnel matters. 6 months ago, we implemented a stringent probationary plan with multiple checkpoints and enhanced oversight. Tyler has met or exceeded every benchmark. He's made full financial restitution ahead of schedule. His ethics project has been implemented as part of our onboarding process for new employees, with excellent feedback. And perhaps most tellingly, he's maintained this performance without complaint or apparent resentment. I nodded, having observed the same pattern. Do you believe the formal probationary period remains necessary? It was a significant question. Tyler's probation was scheduled to last 9 months, with 3 still remaining. Ending it early would be a definitive statement about his rehabilitation. From an HR perspective, Lawrence replied thoughtfully, the purpose of probation is to evaluate whether an employee can meet expected standards and integrate successfully into the organization. Tyler has demonstrated both, consistently, for 6 months. Continuing formal probation at this point feels punitive, rather than constructive. It was essentially the same conclusion I had reached. Draft the paperwork to formally end his probationary status, I decided. He'll continue as a regular intern until the scheduled end of the internship period, with the possibility of permanent employment to be evaluated at that time, just like any other intern. With pleasure, Lawrence said, making a note. And Margaret? This was the right call. Both 6 months ago when you created a path to redemption, and now, recognizing when that path has been successfully traveled. After he left, I sat at my desk reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. When Tyler had stolen my credit card information, I had seen it as a fundamental betrayal of trust, which it was. My initial reaction had been absolute, complete. Severance of professional opportunity, a hard consequence for a serious breach of ethics. What I hadn't fully appreciated then was the possibility of genuine transformation. I had offered Tyler a path to redemption more out of principle than conviction, believing in second chances as a concept while doubting his specific capacity to earn one. He had proven me wrong, in the best possible way. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Tyler just called, sounding happier than he has in months. Something about his Singapore assignment going well? He mentioned you were there too. I smiled, slightly at her transparent fishing for information. The implementation was successful, I replied. Tyler performed excellently. Her response came quickly. Does this mean he's officially out of the doghouse? Such a maternal way of phrasing it. Simplistic but not entirely inaccurate. We'll discuss it at Sunday dinner, I texted back, not wanting to share my decision about ending his probation via message. Some things deserved a proper conversation. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, wanting to review the quarterly projections before my 9 a.m. meeting. As I passed through the security department on my way to the executive elevator, I was surprised to see Tyler already at his desk, focused intently on his computer screen. He looked up as I approached, immediately standing. Good morning, grandmother. Welcome back. You're here early, I observed, especially considering the jet lag. He smiled slightly. I wanted to finish documenting some process improvements the Singapore team suggested. Their approach to multi-factor authentication had some elements we could implement here. Always the dedicated worker, at least since beginning his redemption journey. Don't push too hard, I advised. Jet lag affects judgment. I'll head home at a reasonable hour, he promised. How was your flight? Uneventful, I replied. The best kind. A colleague approached, needing Tyler's input on something, and our brief conversation ended naturally. As I continued to my office, I found myself thinking about how far we had come from that terrible day when Martin had called to report the SAW. Credit card theft. That afternoon, I asked Diane Torres to join me for coffee in my private conference room, a request that raised her eyebrows but elicited no comment. Diane wasn't one for social niceties, preferring direct communication about work matters. The invitation to coffee signaled a conversation of some importance. "I've decided to end Tyler's formal probationary status," I informed her once we were seated. "Lawrence is preparing the paperwork. He'll continue as a regular intern until the end of the internship period." Diane absorbed this information with her usual impassive expression. "Based on performance metrics, that's the appropriate decision," she said after a moment. "He's consistently exceeded expectations." "I value your assessment," I said. "You've worked with him directly these past 6 months." She sipped her coffee before responding. "When you first proposed this arrangement, I had significant doubts. Not about your grandson's technical abilities, those were never in question, but about his character." This blunt assessment didn't surprise me. Diane was known for her straightforward approach. "And now," I prompted, "now I would say he's among the most reliable, conscientious members of my team. Whatever lesson you intended with this arrangement, he appears to have learned it thoroughly." On coming from Diane Torres, this was high praise indeed. "There's another matter I wanted to discuss," I continued. "As you know, we'll be evaluating all interns for potential permanent positions at the end of their internship period. I want to be absolutely clear that Tyler will receive no preferential treatment in that process." "Understood," Diane said. "Though I should note that based on current performance metrics, he would rank among our top candidates even without family connections." "That's good to hear," I acknowledged. "But the evaluation must be objective and transparent. If he earns a position, it will be on merit alone." Diane nodded. "I've never known you to operate any other way, Margaret." Sunday dinner arrived. The first since my return from Singapore. Emily had volunteered to host at her home, a departure from our usual gathering at my house. She had been doing this more often lately, perhaps sensing that these family dinners held new importance in rebuilding our fractured relationships. When I arrived, Tyler was already there, helping his mother in the kitchen while Richard set the table. The scene was one of ordinary family harmony, something I had feared might be permanently damaged by the credit card incident and its aftermath. "Grandma," Tyler greeted me with a warm smile, washing his hands quickly before coming to take my coat. Perfect timing. Mom's lasagna just came out of the oven. The meal was pleasant, filled with conversation about Singapore, Emily's latest research project at the university, and Richard's upcoming medical conference. The tension that had characterized our gatherings in the early months after the incident was notably absent. It wasn't until we were having coffee and dessert that I brought up the subject I had come to discuss. "I've made a decision regarding Tyler's status at Williams Financial," I announced, drawing everyone's attention. Tyler set down his fork, his expression careful but attentive. "The formal probationary period is being terminated, effective immediately," I continued. "You'll continue as a regular intern until the end of the summer, at which point you'll be evaluated for potential permanent employment, just like any other intern." Emily's face lit up. "That's wonderful news!" Richard nodded his approval, reaching over to squeeze Tyler's shoulder. Tyler himself appeared momentarily stunned. "Thank you," he said finally. "I didn't expect this." There are still 3 months left in the original probation plan. "You've met all established benchmarks consistently for 6 months," I explained. "Continuing formal probation at this point would be punitive rather than constructive." He absorbed this with a thoughtful nod. "I appreciate your confidence in me. I won't take it for granted." "See that you don't," I replied, but with a warmth that softened the admonition. Later, as I was preparing to leave, Tyler walked me to my car. The spring evening was mild, the neighborhood quiet except for the distant laughter of children playing in a nearby yard. "I want you to know," Tyler said as we reached my vehicle, "that regardless of whether I'm offered a permanent position at the end of the summer, these past 6 months have changed me fundamentally." I studied his face in the fading light, seeing sincerity in his expression. "The internship opportunity was valuable," he continued, "but the real lesson was about integrity, about facing consequences, about earning back trust instead of expecting it to be automatically granted." "Those are important lessons," I acknowledged. "Not everyone learns them, even with ample opportunity." "I nearly didn't," he admitted. "When you first canceled the internship, all I could think about was how unfair it felt, how one mistake shouldn't cost me such an important opportunity. And now? Now I understand it wasn't just one mistake. It was a profound breach of trust, a failure of character. And the opportunity you eventually offered wasn't something I was entitled to. It was a chance I needed to earn, minute by minute, day by day." His insight impressed me. That's a mature perspective. Tyler smiled slightly. "I had a good teacher, demanding, but fair." As I drove home through the familiar streets of Chicago, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. When I had discovered Tyler's theft, I had been certain of one thing, that trust, once broken so fundamentally, could never be fully restored. I had been wrong. Not because trust was easily rebuilt, it wasn't, but because with sufficient commitment, with consistent action, with genuine change, what seemed irrevocably damaged could indeed be healed. Tyler had earned his second chance, not through words or promises, but through sustained effort and demonstrated growth. In doing so, he had taught me something unexpected about my own capacity for forgiveness and about the transformative power of holding firm boundaries while maintaining an open heart. The credit card incident had threatened to permanently alter our family dynamics, to create a legacy of betrayal and punishment that might have echoed for years to come. Instead, through difficult choices and committed action on both our parts, it had become something different, a painful but ultimately valuable chapter in our shared story. Not an ending, but a beginning. 1 year had passed since that fateful morning when Martin called about the unauthorized credit card charges. The seasons had cycled through, spring to summer, fall to winter, and now spring again, bringing with it the particular energy of renewal that Chicago embraces after its harsh winters. Today marked a special occasion, the official launch of the Ethics in Finance Initiative, a program designed to help university students understand the real-world implications of financial ethics. Tyler had developed it as an expansion of his intern project, working nights and weekends to transform his personal experience into something that might prevent others from making similar mistakes. The launch event was being held at Williams Financial Group headquarters in our largest conference room. University partners, financial industry representatives, and selected media had been invited to witness the unveiling of what was becoming a signature corporate social responsibility program for our company. I stood at the back of the room, observing the proceedings with quiet pride. Tyler, dressed in a tailored suit that lent him a maturity beyond his 21 years, was presenting the program with confidence and conviction. No trace remained of the entitled young man who had once taken his grandmother's credit card information without permission. In his place stood a promising professional with hard-won wisdom. The Ethics in Finance Initiative began with a personal failure, Tyler was saying, his voice steady as he addressed the gathered audience. A poor decision I made that caused harm to someone who had always supported me. He didn't identify me specifically or detail the credit card theft. We had agreed those specifics would remain private, but he spoke honestly about his error in judgment and its consequences. That experience taught me that ethical failures rarely begin with dramatic, obviously wrong choices. They start with small compromises, with rationalizations, with the belief that the ends justify the means. By the time you're making clearly unethical decisions, you've already traveled so far down that path that those decisions can seem reasonable. The room was silent, attendees captivated by his authentic perspective. This program is designed to illuminate that path, to help students recognize those early warning signs and understand the real impact of financial misconduct, not just on organizations, but on relationships and lives. As I watched him field questions from the audience afterward, I marveled at the transformation. Tyler had not only learned from his mistake, he had transformed it into something constructive, a way to help others avoid similar failures. Lawrence appeared at my side, observing the scene with satisfaction. Quite a different young man than the one we were discussing a year ago, he noted quietly. Indeed, I agreed. Growth isn't always linear, but in Tyler's case, the trajectory has been consistently upward. Lawrence nodded. The board was impressed with his proposal for expanding the initiative to other universities. Several members specifically mentioned his maturity in presenting it. This was news to me. When did he present to the board? Last week's Educational Outreach Committee meeting, Lawrence replied. I assumed you knew. I shook my head slightly. I deliberately recused myself from that committee when his proposal came up for consideration. It needed to succeed or fail on its own merits. It succeeded resoundingly, Lawrence assured me. Full funding approved for the 3-year expansion plan. As the event concluded and attendees began networking over refreshments, Emily made her way to my side, her expression glowing with maternal pride. Can you believe that's the same boy who couldn't remember to take out the trash without being reminded 10 times? She asked, watching as Tyler engaged confidently with the university representatives. He's not a boy anymore, I observed. He's proven that over this past year. Emily's expression softened. Thank you, Mom, for seeing what he could become, even when he was at his worst. I didn't always see it clearly, I admitted. There were moments when I wondered if I was making a mistake by giving him that second chance. But you did it anyway, Emily said. You created a path for him when you could have simply closed the door. Before I could respond, Tyler joined us, slightly flushed with the success of the presentation. What did you think? He asked, his question directed primarily to me. Professional, substantive, and authentic, I replied honestly. You've created something valuable here, Tyler, something that transcends its origins. His expression registered genuine pleasure at the assessment. That means a lot, coming from you. This whole project wouldn't exist without your approach to what happened last year. My approach? Consequences with a path forward, he clarified. Accountability without permanent condemnation. It's become the philosophical foundation of the program. Emily excused herself to greet a colleague, leaving Tyler and me in a moment of private conversation. The board approved your expansion proposal, I told him. Lawrence just informed me. His eyes widened slightly. That's fantastic news. I wasn't expecting a decision so quickly. Apparently, you made quite an impression, I noted. Though I wouldn't know directly, I recused myself from the committee. Understanding dawned in his expression. That's why you weren't at the meeting. I wondered about that. It was important that the initiative succeed on its own merits, not because of family connections. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. A year ago, that would have bothered me. Felt like you were distancing yourself from my work. Now I understand it was actually the greatest vote of confidence you could give. His insight impressed me yet again. You've grown tremendously, Tyler. I had excellent motivation, he replied, and a pretty compelling example of integrity to follow. The remainder of the event passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. When it concluded, Tyler stayed behind to ensure all materials were properly packed up and follow-up emails scheduled. the mark of a thorough professional who understood that success lies in details as well as grand visions. Later that evening, as I prepared for the quarterly leadership dinner at my home, my thoughts returned to the journey of the past year. When Tyler had betrayed my trust, I had faced a choice: to simply punish or to create a path for genuine redemption. The easier choice would have been straightforward punishment, canceling the internship, severing professional ties, perhaps even reducing personal contact. Instead, I had chosen the more difficult path, establishing clear consequences while providing an opportunity for growth and restoration. It had required more effort, more thought, more ongoing engagement. It had meant remaining firm on accountability while being open to evidence of change. It had demanded that I separate my personal hurt from my assessment of Tyler's actions and progress. That choice had not only transformed Tyler's trajectory, but had enriched our relationship in unexpected ways. The surface-level affection of before had been replaced by something deeper, a connection forged through difficulty, strengthened by honest confrontation, and sustained by mutual respect. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of my first guests for the leadership dinner. As I welcomed them into my home, I noticed Tyler's car pulling into the driveway. He had recently been promoted to junior analyst in our security division, AEE, position he had earned through consistent excellence, not family connection. The promotion had come with an invitation to quarterly leadership events, placing him among the up-and-coming professionals being groomed for greater responsibility. I watched through the window as he collected a portfolio from his passenger seat, materials for the brief presentation each department would be making tonight. His movements were confident but not arrogant, purposeful but not hurried. The posture of someone comfortable in his professional identity. When he entered, he greeted me warmly but appropriately, then moved to set up his materials in the designated area. Several senior leaders approached him, offering congratulations on the morning's ethics initiative launch. He accepted their praise graciously, redirecting credit to the team that had helped develop the educational components. Throughout the evening, as presentations were made and strategic discussions unfolded, I observed Tyler's interactions with the leadership team. He spoke when he had something substantive to contribute, listened attentively when others shared expertise, and navigated the subtle politics of such gatherings with natural ease. Tyler, dressed in a tailored suit that lent him a maturity beyond his 21 years, was presenting the program with confidence and conviction. No trace remained of the entitled young man who had once taken his grandmother's credit card information without permission. In his place stood a promising professional with hard-won wisdom. The Ethics in Finance initiative began with a personal failure, Tyler was saying, his voice steady as he addressed the gathered audience. A poor decision. I made that caused harm to someone who had always supported me. He didn't identify me specifically or detail the credit card theft. We had agreed those specifics would remain private, but he spoke honestly about his error in judgment and its consequences. That experience taught me that ethical failures rarely begin with dramatic, obviously wrong choices. They start with small compromises, with rationalizations, with the belief that the ends justify the means. By the time you're making clearly unethical decisions, you've already traveled so far down that path that those decisions can seem reasonable. The room was silent, attendees captivated by his authentic perspective. This program is designed to illuminate that path, to help students recognize those early warning signs and understand the real impact of financial misconduct, not just on organizations, but on relationships and lives. As I watched him field questions from the audience afterward, I marveled at the transformation. Tyler had not only learned from his mistake, he had transformed it into something constructive, a way to help others avoid similar failures. Lawrence appeared at my side, observing the scene with satisfaction. Quite a different young man than the one we were discussing a year ago, he noted quietly. Indeed, I agreed. Growth isn't always linear, but in Tyler's case, the trajectory has been consistently upward. Lawrence nodded. The board was impressed with his proposal for expanding the initiative to other universities. Several members specifically mentioned his maturity in presenting it. This was news to me. When did he present to the board? Last week's Educational Outreach Committee meeting, Lawrence replied. I assumed you knew. I shook my head slightly. I deliberately recused myself from that committee when his proposal came up for consideration. It needed to succeed or fail, on its own merits. It succeeded resoundingly, Lawrence assured me. Full funding approved for the 3-year expansion plan. As the event concluded and attendees began networking over refreshments, Emily made her way to my side, her expression glowing with maternal pride. Can you believe that's the same boy who couldn't remember to take out the trash without being reminded 10 times? She asked, watching as Tyler engaged confidently with the university representatives. He's not a boy anymore, I observed. He's proven that over this past year. Emily's expression softened. Thank you, Mom, for seeing what he could become, even when he was at his worst. I didn't always see it clearly, I admitted. There were moments when I wondered if I was making a mistake by giving him that second chance. But you did it anyway, Emily said. You created a path for him when you could have simply closed the door. Before I could respond, Tyler joined us, slightly flushed with the success of the presentation. What did you think? He asked, his question directed primarily to me. Professional, substantive, and authentic, I replied honestly. You've created something valuable here, Tyler. Something that transcends its origins. His expression registered genuine pleasure at the assessment. That means a lot, coming from you. This whole project wouldn't exist without your approach to what happened last year. My approach? Consequences with a path forward, he clarified. Accountability without permanent condemnation. It's become the philosophical foundation of the program. Emily excused herself to greet a colleague, leaving Tyler and me in a moment of private conversation. The board approved your expansion proposal, I told him. Lawrence just informed me. His eyes widened slightly. That's fantastic news. I wasn't expecting a decision so quickly. Apparently you made quite an impression, I noted. Though I wouldn't know directly, I recused myself from the committee. Understanding dawned in his expression. That's why you weren't at the meeting. I wondered about that. It was important that the initiative succeed on its own merits, not because of family connections. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. A year ago, that would have bothered me. Felt like you were distancing yourself from my work. Now I understand it was actually the greatest vote of confidence you could give. His insight impressed me yet again. You've grown tremendously, Tyler. I had excellent motivation, he replied, and a pretty compelling example of integrity to follow. The remainder of the event passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. When it concluded, Tyler stayed behind to ensure all materials were properly packed up and follow-up emails scheduled. The mark of a thorough professional who understood that success lies in details as well as grand visions. Later that evening, as I prepared for the quarterly leadership dinner at my home, my thoughts returned to the journey of the past year. When Tyler had betrayed my trust, I had faced a choice: to simply punish or to create a path for genuine redemption. The easier choice would have been straightforward punishment, canceling the internship, severing professional ties, perhaps even reducing personal contact. Instead, I had chosen the more difficult path, establishing clear consequences while providing an opportunity for growth and restoration. It had required more effort, more thought, more ongoing engagement. It had meant remaining firm on accountability while being open to evidence of change. It had demanded that I separate my personal hurt from my assessment of Tyler's actions and progress. That choice had not only transformed Tyler's trajectory, but had enriched our relationship in unexpected ways. The surface-level affection of before had been replaced by something deeper, a connection forged through difficulty, strengthened by honest confrontation, and sustained by mutual respect. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of my first guests for the leadership dinner. As I welcomed them into my home, I noticed Tyler's car pulling into the driveway. He had recently been promoted to junior analyst in our security division, a high position he had earned through consistent excellence, not family connection. The promotion had come with an invitation to quarterly leadership events, placing him among the up-and-coming professionals being groomed for greater responsibility. I watched through the window as he collected a portfolio from his passenger seat, materials for the brief presentation each department would be making tonight. His movements were confident but not arrogant, purposeful but not hurried, the posture of someone comfortable in his professional identity. When he entered, he greeted me warmly but appropriately, then moved to set up his materials in the designated area. Several senior leaders approached him, offering congratulations on the morning's ethics initiative launch. He accepted their praise graciously, redirecting credit to the team that had helped develop the educational components. Throughout the evening, as presentations were made and strategic discussions unfolded, I observed Tyler's interactions with the leadership team. He spoke when he had something substantive to contribute, listened attentively when others shared expertise, and navigated the subtle politics of such gatherings with natural ease. He nodded, taking a seat across from me. "The thoroughness of your succession planning has been impressive. I've heard board members commenting that it's setting a new standard for leadership transitions. Proper planning prevents poor performance." I quoted one of my long-standing business principles. Tyler smiled. "You taught me that my first week as an intern." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware of the significance of this day. "I wanted to give you something before the official proceedings begin," Tyler said finally, placing a small wrapped package on my desk. "A retirement gift of sorts, though I know how you feel about that word." "Transition," I corrected automatically, making him smile again. I had been insistent throughout this process that I was not retiring, but transitioning to a different relationship with the company I had built. I opened the package carefully, revealing a beautiful silver frame. Inside was not a photograph, as I had expected, but a printed copy of an email, the ethics module proposal Tyler had submitted 5 years ago, following the credit card incident. My handwritten notes were visible in the margins. "Approach has merit. Implement as pilot program with quarterly evaluation." "I found this in my files recently," Tyler explained. "It reminded me how a single decision, yours, to give me that second chance, can alter the entire trajectory of someone's life." I studied the framed document, remembering the conflicted emotions I had felt reviewing his proposal at that difficult time, skepticism warring with hope, disappointment with cautious optimism. The Ethics in Finance initiative now operates in 47 universities across 3 continents, Tyler continued. Over 15,000 students have completed the program. We've received testimonials from dozens who faced ethical crossroads and made better choices because of what they learned. Pride swelled in my chest, not just for what Tyler had accomplished, but for what his journey represented. From a serious ethical lapse to creating a program that prevents others from making similar mistakes, I observed. "That's genuine redemption, Tyler." "I had an excellent guide," he replied simply. "Someone who understood that true leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how you respond to them, how you hold yourself and others accountable, how you create pathways to growth even in the most difficult circumstances." His words touched me deeply. I had spent my career focused on building a successful business, but perhaps my most important legacy was sitting across from me now, a young man who had faltered, learned, grown, and was now helping others do the same. The intercom buzzed, Vanessa's voice announcing that board members were beginning to gather in the conference room. "We should join them," I said, rising from my desk. It's time. Tyler stood as well. Before we do, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. Something I've come to understand only recently. I paused, giving him my full attention. When I took your credit card information 5 years ago, I thought I was just making a poor financial decision, a selfish choice that hurt someone I cared about. But I've realized it was much more than that. I was prioritizing immediate gratification over integrity, image over substance, convenience over character. I nodded, recognizing the depth of his self-reflection. The greatest gift you gave me wasn't the second chance at the internship, though that was significant, he continued. It was showing me, through your response, what true integrity looks like in action. You held me accountable without reducing me to my worst moment. You maintained clear boundaries while allowing for genuine growth. You prioritized principles over both punitive impulses and familial sentiment. His voice carried the weight of sincere conviction. I carry those lessons into every decision I make now, professional and personal. They've become the foundation of who I am. As we walked together toward the boardroom, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. What had begun as a painful betrayal had ultimately strengthened our relationship and shaped Tyler into a leader of exceptional character. The credit card incident, once a source of profound disappointment, had transformed into a catalyst for growth neither of us could have anticipated. The boardroom fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning toward me. The table was surrounded by familiar faces, trusted colleagues, skilled executives, dedicated board members who had helped guide Williams Financial Group through decades of growth and change. As I took my place at the head of the table, one final time. A sudden clarity washed over me, a profound realization about leadership and legacy that I had been approaching throughout my career, but only now fully grasped. True leadership isn't measured merely by financial success or organizational growth, though both are important. It's measured by the impact you have on the people around you, by your ability to inspire integrity, to foster growth, to create environments where others can learn from both successes and failures. It's measured by whether those you lead become better versions of themselves through their association with you. I looked at Tyler, now seated among the company's senior executives, embodying the principles I had spent a lifetime upholding. His journey from ethical failure to exemplary leadership, I saw my most meaningful achievement, not the buildings bearing the Williams name or the billions in assets under management, but the living legacy of values transmitted and transformed. Through relationship, the board chair called the meeting to order, beginning the formal process of leadership transition. As I prepared to deliver my final address as CEO, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges Williams Financial Group might face in the future, the foundation was solid. Not just the financial foundation, but the ethical one. And Tyler, once the cause of my greatest disappointment, had become one of my greatest sources of pride. The credit card incident that had once threatened to irreparably damage our relationship had instead become a defining moment of growth for us both. A painful, but ultimately transformative chapter in our shared story. As I rose to speak, I caught Tyler's eye across the table. The look we exchanged contained volumes: mutual respect, shared understanding, and the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes our most difficult challenges reveal our most important truths. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that life's greatest tests aren't meant to break us, but to reveal what we're truly made of, and to show us what we're capable of becoming. My company was in good hands. My legacy was secure, not in buildings or balance sheets, but in the values that would continue long after I stepped away. And the painful incident that had once seemed like an ending had proven to be just the beginning of something far more meaningful than I could have imagined. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in our most painful experiences. Sometimes our greatest disappointments lead to our most profound growth. And sometimes, The very moments we wish we could erase from our lives become the foundation for our most important realizations. The credit card betrayal had taught us both that integrity isn't just about making the right choices when everyone is watching. It's about the choices we make when we think no one will ever know. It's about the standards we hold ourselves to, not because of external consequences, but because of who we want to be. That was the final lesson, the ultimate realization, that character isn't built through easy decisions but through difficult ones. That leadership isn't demonstrated during smooth sailing but during the storm. That our response to betrayal, both as the betrayed and the betrayer, reveals more about who we are than perhaps anything else. As I began my farewell address to the board, I carried this wisdom not as a burden, but as a gift. One I would continue to share long after I left this boardroom. And in Tyler's attentive presence, I saw the living proof that second chances, when offered with both accountability and opportunity, can lead to transformation beyond anything we might dare to hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.